Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. Okay, in this video, we're going to be talking about my favorite science fiction movies of all time. Now remember, these are my favorite science fiction movies of all time. If your list differs, that's great. Look, there are so many movies that I could have chosen to put on this list, but I had to be decisive for the purposes of time, okay? I don't want to create a video that's, 9.5 hours long. So I had to pick the ones that I tend to gravitate towards the most. Now, like the video that I uploaded where I talked about my favorite 80s and 90s comedies of all time, I will give you my top 10 list here, as you can see, followed by some honorable mentions. And remember, the honorable mentions aren't in the honorable mention category because they're not as good as the ones that end up right here front and center. They're more or less, my way of trying to get more onto the list. So I had to put them in like an honorable mention category, quote unquote, right? Okay, and no, you are not losing your mind. You are looking at a top 10 list that does not have Star Wars on it. Now, the reason for that is because I don't consider Star Wars science fiction. I consider it fantasy. So if I was to do a top 10 list of my favorite fantasy movies of all time, that is where you will find Star Wars. So everybody just calm down. It's all right. You are not losing your minds. Okay, so these are not going to be formal movie reviews because obviously I have 15 movies I have to get through, my top 10 and 5 honorable mentions, and of course I don't have time to do formal movie reviews, and I don't do formal movie reviews. So anyway, but I will talk briefly about each one, and then we'll move right along to the next one. And you comment below and let me know what are some of your favorite science fiction movies of all time. Okay, going to the top left, the very first one. This is in no particular order, by the way, of course, as usual, but the very first one is my favorite science fiction movie of all time, and that is 1968's Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now, this movie celebrated its 50th anniversary this year. Hard to believe, unbelievable. And I had the wonderful fortune of actually visiting a Stanley Kubrick exhibit here in Toronto about 2 or 3 years ago, which was totally awesome. I love Kubrick. And this movie is, of course, not for everybody. This is a very deep film, a very cerebral film. It's very slow moving in its pace. I remember the very first time I watched it, I was about 15 maybe, because I knew I had sort of the intelligence at 15 to know that this movie is very important, and this movie is very deep. And I was very into sort of, other worlds and space and aliens and time and what does it all mean and the bigger picture and who are we and where we're going and all that kind of shit, right? I was like that at 15, but of course I was only 15. So when I watched the movie, I remember thinking it was very boring. I remember loving the last half of the film, but the first half of the movie I thought was very boring and slow moving, and I didn't appreciate it because I was too young. I watched it years later, and of course I get it now. I understand why I'm watching these apes for the first 10 minutes of the film, right? I understand the whole point of all that, and it was sort of hard to grasp when you're a kid. You don't appreciate it like you do as an adult. So this movie is fantastic, and every time I watch this movie, I cannot help feel that I am watching greatness, that I'm watching a very important message about humanity and where we come from and where we're going and what it all means. And there's so much deep symbolism in this movie. Kubrick was fantastic at that. I mean, as I've mentioned before about Stanley Kubrick, Kubrick was one of the greatest filmmakers that ever lived, and he was one of the most meticulous filmmakers that ever lived. Every single thing that is in frame in a Kubrick film, every single angle, every single shot, every single moment has intent, has strategic purpose. There is nothing that is in a frame, in the background, in the foreground, off to the side, that is not supposed to be there, that Kubrick is not aware of. That doesn't mean everything has, every single thing has some sort of deep meaning to it, but everything is supposed to be there. It's all strategic, and he was very calculated. He was very stubborn. He knew what he wanted, and he was hell-bent on doing everything he could to get it because he knew its story, he knew its purpose, and he knew what he needed to do to get what he wanted for any picture he was working on. And The Shining is a perfect example of that as well. So 2001, A Space Odyssey, again, I can't go deep into it. There are many videos online that you can watch all about that, but certainly not only my favorite, but one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, certainly about who we are and where we're going and our purpose and just who the hell we are. Fantastic shit, man. Anyway, moving right along is 1991's Terminator 2 Judgment Day, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton and that Furlong kid. What the hell's his first name again? Yeah, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Rocky. Okay, this is the movie he's most identified with. Not only the character that he's most identified with, obviously, but the movie that he's most identified with. He's not most identified with the first Terminator, even though the first Terminator I thought was great. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was solid. But usually when people think of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator, they think of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and it is a good movie. It is one of the few times, it does happen from time to time, it does, but in the big picture of major motion pictures, it is very far and few between, but it is one of those rare occasions where the sequel surpasses the original, and this movie is fantastic in every sort of way, and Arnold is at his sort of prime best. Absolutely love this movie, and of course, I don't need to go deep into it. We all know about Terminator 2, Judgment Day, right? Okay, moving right along, next to that is 2009's Moon, starring Sam Rockwell and Kevin Spacey as the voice of the robot Gertie. Now, this movie, I love this movie. My buddy Bruce showed me this movie about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. No, 5 or 6 years ago now, because I wasn't living where I am now, and I've been living where I am now for about 5 years. So it had to have been about 6 years ago. And I loved it. I wasn't crazy when he was first telling me about it, and I was like, well, okay, but I love Sam Rockwell. Ever since I saw him in The Green Mile, I was like, that dude he's a great character actor. He's got some serious acting chops, and everything he's in, he makes it better. Even the Poltergeist remake, okay, was a fucking shit show, but he made it better. Any movie he's in, he makes better. Whether the movie is shitty or not, he makes the movie better. So I love Sam Rockwell as an actor. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to give this a shot. And when I read the premise, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to give this a shot. It's very much in the same sort of vein and style and execution as 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, in my opinion, it is nowhere near the genius of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but that doesn't mean the movie is not good in and of itself and does not have genius in and of itself, because it certainly does. So Moon is essentially about Sam Rockwell's character. He plays an astronaut by the name of Sam Bell, who I believe is on this 3-year mission on the moon, and it's about to come to an end, and he's very eager to get back to Earth to reunite with his daughter and his wife, right, who he hasn't seen in a long time. And then suddenly I think he begins to suffer from some sort of health issues. He's got bad headaches, hallucinations, and then at one point when he's out on the moon in his rover, he nearly comes to this, fatal accident where, he almost dies. And when he gets back to the ship, he meets what appears to be a younger version of himself, a clone. There's literally, there he is he gets back to the main sort of pod where he is, and he goes in and he meets himself. And Sam Rockwell plays both characters, obviously. And it's so good. And then you're just like, what's going on? And he's trying to figure out what's going on here. Are you me? Am I you? Am I not really me? Am I just a clone? I don't want to get too deep into it, but if you haven't seen Moon, it's creepy, it's eerie, it's got some cerebral sort of, narrative to it. You're put in the same position as the characters, so you're both trying to figure out what's going on together. Now, Moon is not about, aliens like the movie Alien or Aliens or like that fucking shit show that came out, a few years ago called Apollo 18. It's not that kind of a movie. So don't think that there's going to be these weird creatures and that's going to happen. No. It's not that kind of a film. It's much more cerebral, intelligent. It's really sort of grounded in reality. And this guy just has to figure out why are there two of me now? What the fuck is going on? Anyway, I won't say too much more because then I have to get into spoiler territory, but it's pretty cool shit. Okay, on to the next one is, 1985's Back to the Future. A lot of people forget that this is a science fiction movie. Yes, it's an adventure film, and I think you're likely more to see it in the action adventure movie sort of category when you talk about it, but it is science fiction. Because, time travel is considered a science fiction sort of topic of discussion. And this is all about time travel. And of course, we literally cannot go back in time. We can go into the future. We can't come back from the future, but it is believed believe that because of the theory of relativity and time, we actually can travel into the future if we can travel at the speed of light for a certain amount of time. And because time is all relative. So if I'm traveling at the speed of light, out in space, only, at a certain amount of, for a certain amount of time, only 2 years may pass for me, but 90 years may pass here on Earth. So I, theoretically have gone into the future. When I come back to Earth, I am in the future and I'm only 2 years older, but everybody else is dead. But I can't go back. So it's not like I, can get that 90 years back, right? So anyway, yeah, Back to the Future, 100%, one of my favorite science fiction adventure movies of all time. To this day, it holds up. It holds up. Like, it really does hold up. It's a really good movie and a classic in the genre nonetheless. Okay, moving right along, next to Back to the Future is 2002's Minority Report, starring Tom Cruise and directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, this is a great movie, 100%, and some could argue that this was Steven Spielberg's last really good, science fiction-y adventure movie, probably until Ready Player One that just came out this year. So, 16 years. Now, he did do War of the Worlds, which came out in 2005, which also starred Tom Cruise and Tim Robbins, and a very young Dakota Fanning. But that movie was met with sort of mixed reviews. Now, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was solid. I thought it was good. But certainly, Minority Report is far superior and better. And then, of course, after that and after War of the Worlds, he got into the biopic territory, right? So he got into, Munich, Lincoln, Warhorse. He tried to do some adventure films with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And, of course, the BFG and Tintin. And even though Tintin was great, it sort of slipped under the radar. And when you think of Steven Spielberg over the last, say 10, 15 years, Tintin doesn't seem to appear on the radar, but he did do it. But yeah, so Minority Report was probably his last Spielbergy adventure science fiction movie that really hit the pop culture consciousness right up until, Ready Player One. I mean, even if, even the BFG was a box office disappointment. So, great shit. Love Minority Report, a movie I could watch. I mean, just the concept of being able to be, committed of a crime or arrested for a crime that you haven't even committed yet and you don't even know you're thinking about yet. Like, that's a scary fucking world, man. And something tells me that we're kind of heading that direction with many different sort of areas of what's going on. But anyway, okay, moving right along is 2009's Avatar. Now, I know this is the movie that everybody loves to hate, okay? But I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. And I know there are people out there that are going to be thinking, yeah, but Dave, it's just Pocahontas and Spaceman. Yeah, but Dave, it just Dances with Wolves, but in space, Dave. There's no originality there, Dave. If I had time today, I could bring up probably about 20 to 25 movies that you love so much that are based on other stories, that are taken from other stories, okay? So let's not pretend that, first of all, let's not pretend that Star Wars is also, original as well. The hero's journey of what Star Wars is all about has been told since the beginning of time, okay? But it wasn't told in this way, with these characters, with this sort of narrative, all right? But the foundation of Star Wars is not original, ladies and gentlemen, nor is the foundation of Avatar. Yes, that's true, but it's never been told this way, with this kind of spectacle, with this kind of magic, with this kind of intensity, with this kind of realism. What Weta Digital did for the digital effects of Avatar were off the charts. This was the movie in 2009 that began the 3D craze. Now, I will say this, I am sick and goddamn tired of all these 3D movies. Not every freaking movie needs to be in 3D, but anytime there's a bona fide blockbuster that's released, it's released in 3D. And the only reason why they release them in 3D, ladies and gentlemen, is because they can charge more money for the experience. But the movies aren't even shot in 3D, okay? Solo wasn't shot, for 3D in mind, and neither were any of the Star Wars movies or any of the Avenger movies or any of the superhero movies, but they're converted into 3D so they can charge more money and get more cash. Avatar, on the other hand, was created for the specific intent of the 3D experience. And it was subtle, and it was nuanced, and it was only in your face when it needed to be, and it was beautiful. One of the most incredible movie-going experiences I've ever had in my life, and I don't give a frog's fat ass whether you agree with me or not. I am thrilled that you do if you do, but at the end of the day, if you're like, well, I think it's shit, well then go ahead, think it's shit. I really couldn't care less. Fantastic film. I do I do agree that I think a sequel to Avatar should have been within 5 years after the release of the original. So we should have seen a sequel to Avatar at the very earliest, 2000, I'd say maybe 11 or 12, and at the very latest, about 2015, 100%. The fact that we're not going to see the sequel to Avatar until 2020, 11 years after the original, could be problematic, but it might not be. I mean, this is James Cameron. I mean, he's hit the, I mean, it seems like everything he touches turns to gold, right? Whether it's True Lies, whether it's Terminator 2, whether it's Aliens, whether it's Avatar, whether it's Titanic. I mean, this guy just rolls out sort of hit after hit. He's like the Daniel Day-Lewis of, directors. He makes a movie, it's a fucking phenomenal fucking thing that just blows everybody's mind, and then he goes away for like 10 years, doesn't do anything, reaps the rewards of the financial gain of that movie, and then comes back and knocks it out of the fucking park again. I mean, he's done this time and time again, so I'm not, it's James Cameron. Good Canadian boy, by the way. And so I certainly will not bet against James Cameron. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do by taking Avatar 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 or, however many more they're making to the next level. I'm really looking for, and James Cameron knows that. He knows that he can't just redo a sort of, a generic sequel to the first film. He knows that he has to, the bar's been set and he has to take it up a notch. So I'm really looking forward to that. Definitely Avatar, one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. And of course, the highest grossing movie in motion picture history at the worldwide box office with $2.7 billion. No movie even comes close. Okay, moving right along is 1994's Star Trek Generations. Now, I know this is a movie that may surprise a lot of you. It's certainly not going to appear on a lot of people's favorite science fiction movies of all time, but it is for me. I saw it in 1994 when it came out, when I was 15 years old. I saw it in the theater, and I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy the original series. I enjoy Generations. I enjoy the new movies. I really do. I wouldn't consider myself a hardcore fan, though. I certainly... between Star Wars and Star Trek, I would consider myself a Star Wars fan. But that being said, what I love about this movie is I really enjoyed watching, the two generations come together. It was epic. It was iconic. It was like seeing LeBron James and Michael Jordan come together and have to work together, right? Or like Sidney Crosby and Wayne Gretzky, right? Or like, an actor today that's really popular with an actor from the golden age, right? Come together. And it was cool. I liked the premise. I liked the idea of seeing Captain Kirk and the original crew one last time, and sort of the passing of the torch. And who doesn't love Malcolm McDowell as the villain, right? I mean, this I think was my first introduction to Malcolm McDowell as an actor. For most people, it was probably A Clockwork Orange, which was a fantastic film, but I was very young when I saw this movie, like I said, 15. So I was familiar with the movie A Clockwork Orange, but I hadn't seen it at that point. So this movie was sort of my introduction to who Malcolm McDowell was. And then, of course, afterwards, I watched a few movies with him in it. But definitely for me, it's got a soft spot. It's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's not on my list because I think it is one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. Not at all. It's one of my favorite because of the premise. I love watching the two generations have to work together. It's like, wow, it's iconic, right? I mean, very rarely do you see or do you have an opportunity to bring two generations of any sort of saga together. So that's essentially why it appears on my list. Okay, moving right along is 1993's Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg, the original Jurassic Park. I was 14 when it came out, and I remember, even at 14, looking back now, 25 years, I remember even then having to line up outside of the movie theater to go and see this movie. And very rarely do you get that kind of a thing. Very rarely are movies events nowadays because there's a blockbuster being released essentially like every weekend. It's not special anymore. The last time I remember an event was, of course, The Force Awakens, right? That was sort of, for those of you who are not old enough to remember what it was like going to the movies in the 80s and the 90s, that's what it was like. Those kind of movies didn't come around very often. There was usually one, maybe two a summer, a bona fide blockbuster that everybody was dying to see, that it was highly anticipated. And it was an event. You would line up outside, you would sit in line, it was a big sort of deal. And Jurassic Park was one of those movies. But Jurassic Park came out at a time when, you weren't releasing, it's not like the following week there was another huge bona fide blockbuster followed by another bona fide blockbuster followed by another bona fide blockbuster. I mean, look what just happened now. We had, Infinity Wars followed by Deadpool, followed by Solo, followed by, Jurassic World that's coming out, in another couple of weeks, followed by, this. I mean, there's going to be like 15, 20 blockbusters all within like 3 or 4 months of each other. So, this was an era where that didn't exist. And I miss that era. And when The Force Awakens came out, a few years ago, that was an event because of how highly anticipated it was. But that's what it was like 25, 30 years ago. When a movie came out of that caliber, it was an event. It was exciting. You'd line up. There was all this buzz and everybody was talking about it, but you only got that like once or twice, maybe 3 times in a summer, but 3 is pushing it. 3 was pushing it. So I miss that era. So when I think of Jurassic Park, that's what comes to my mind. I think of lining up outside, the buzz, the excitement, Spielberg, dinosaurs, new technology, being able to see dinosaurs on the screen in this way for the first time in motion picture history. It was just like, wow, you know what I mean? It was like so cool. And we don't have those kind of, events anymore. And it's just, yeah, I mean, Avatar would have been the last sort of movie event prior to The Force Awakens that everybody was buzzing about and, going to see because of the technology, because of what was in it. Not necessarily because of the story, but because of the execution. And it's exciting, and it will happen again. I mean, eventually we're going to move on to like VR, right? And I do believe that in the coming years, movie theaters will have some sort of virtual reality technology. And that's sort of the next step from 3D. So yeah. Anyway, Jurassic Park, awesome shit. Okay, moving right along is 2014's Ex Machina, starring Poe and Hux from the new Star Wars films. That's right, folks. We've got Domhnall Gleeson and Oscar Isaac and Alicia Vikander. Am I saying that right? Alicia Vikander, I think that's her name. Anyways, yeah, this movie's great and independent film, got great reviews. There's really not a lot I can say without giving it away, but let's just say that Domhnall Gleeson plays this programmer who he believes is selected to participate in some sort of experiment in synthetic intelligence. He has to evaluate essentially how human the humanoid is, whether it can get to the point where he can tell the difference. And if he can't tell the difference, it's like, wow, now things are starting to get real, right? So he's brought to this sort of secure, location out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. It's head up by the head of the company, which is played by Oscar Isaac. And little does Domhnall Gleeson realize okay, I can't get too far into it there, but things are not what they seem. Let's put it that way. But great performances and really cool movie. Very subtle, nuanced, not in your face, but a nice grounded science fiction film that leaves you kind of going, wow, that's, yeah, I could totally buy that. Could totally see that could be a problem. One of those science fiction movies that just kind of leave you going, yeah, really kind of creepy shit. Yeah. Anyways, moving right along, I gotta put this on the list because I just saw it not too long ago. 2018's Ready Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg. The reason why this is on the list is not because I think it's one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. Again, folks, if you don't agree with anything on here, that's fine. These are my favorite science fiction movies of all time. If your list varies, knock yourself out. I had somebody message me a few weeks ago when I was talking about the 80s films and go, yeah, your list sucks, that, it's not true. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's not true? These are my favorite 80s comedies of all time. If they're not your favorite, or if you don't agree with me, or if there's something on the list that you don't like, well, that's fine. But these are my favorite 80s and 90s comedies of all time. Just like these are my favorite science fiction movies of all time. And Ready Player One is up there. Ready Player One, when I watched it a few months ago with my girlfriend in the theater, I felt like a kid. It had that 80s, feel to it, not just because of the fact of all of the 80s sort of nods through the movies, the video games, the pop culture, the music. I don't mean that. I mean in terms of its execution, its pacing. It felt like that old school Steven Spielbergian sort of adventure that he is known for delivering, that knows how to deliver, but over the last 15 years or so hasn't, because he's been really diving deep into these biopics and, all that kind of shit. Like I just said, with, The Post, War Horse, Munich, Lincoln. This is classic Spielberg. This is the reason why we go to the movies. If this movie had come out in 1985 or 86, this would have been a bona fide instant science fiction classic. 100%. 100%. Today, it does well, it gets good reviews, but it gets lost into the mix because, a couple of weeks later, there's some other huge bona fide blockbuster coming out. So, but anyway, yeah, if you haven't seen Ready Player One, it's not going to change the face of cinema. It's not going to change the way we look at movies, but if you were a kid growing up in the 80s like I was, you are going to love this movie. It's going to make you feel like a kid again. Nobody does it like Steven Spielberg. So, yeah. So anyway, those are my top 10 favorite science fiction movies of all time. Like I said in my top favorite 80s and 90s comedies of all time, there's so many I could choose, but I have to be decisive and I have to select a select few so I can put them on the list. But there are many ones that are not on this list that could easily be on this list 100%. But these are some of my favorite science fiction movies of all time, sort of a top 10 list that I quickly put together there. Now let's go to honorable mentions. Honorable mentions are the original Planet of the Apes, The Abyss, James Cameron's The Abyss. Many people forget about James Cameron and The Abyss. When they think of James Cameron, they don't necessarily think of The Abyss. Another great sci-fi classic, in my opinion, an amazing film. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blade Runner, E.T., and I'll give you two other, just for shits and giggles, two other honorable mentions. We'll make it 7 honorable mentions instead of 5 because, there's just so many to choose from. We have Children of Men and Steven Spielberg's AI, Artificial Intelligence from 2001. That movie I don't think gets the credit it deserves. I don't think it's an amazing movie, but I do think it's a really solid Spielberg science fiction classic. And yeah, so those are some of my favorite science fiction movies of all time. Now, I know there's probably some of you that are thinking, Dave, how come Alien didn't end up on the list? How come Aliens didn't end up on the list? Where the heck is the original Terminator, man? Where is it, man? Hey, those movies could easily have ended up on this list, but I have to pick my favorites, the ones that I tend to gravitate towards the most. Your list might be different. Comment below and let me know what they are. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdave McRae. McRae is MCRAE. Facebook.com/manythingsdave McRae. That's where I tend to post when I'm not posting here in the meantime and in between time. And also, if you want to support this channel on Patreon, you can. We are up to 40 patrons right now out of my goal of 100. If we get to 100, all of your names will be entered into a draw to win a 12.5-inch Michael Myers replica Lamson knife. But we got to get to 100 patrons. Also, we're at 23 out of a minimum of 25 patrons for level number 3. If we can get 2 more, I will start doing 2 live Halloween only AMAs a month, specifically for those people that choose that level, leading up to the release of the new Halloween movie on October the 19th, 2018. And we're only 2 away. We're only 2 away where I can start doing that next month. My goal is to start doing that next month. So hopefully you guys will want to support the channel each and every month to be able to make that a reality. Again, I'm starting to move my schedule around and we're starting to implement this into my day-to-day. So things are looking good. So yeah, comment below and let me know your thoughts. Until next time, I will talk to you guys soon. Cheers.